Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Joshua Barnes, coming to you live from the Firstpost studios. First, let's take a look at the headlines. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi says individuals involved in yesterday's explosion in Delhi will be brought to justice. The National Investigation Agency takes charge of the probe into the blast that killed at least 12 people. Pakistan's Interior Minister says at least 12 are killed and 27 others injured in a suicide attack outside a court in the capital, Islamabad. Iraqis head to the polls for a crucial parliamentary election, watched closely by the US and Iran, as the country seeks to turn the page on decades of conflict and corruption. Schools in Mali reopen after a 2-week suspension due to a nationwide fuel shortage that paralysed public transport and kept teachers and students at home. And after wreaking havoc through the Philippines, Typhoon Fanwong brings heavy rain and localised flooding across Taiwan ahead of its predicted landfall tomorrow. We begin with the latest from Tanzania, where heartbreak and outrage are spreading in the wake of deadly election-related violence. Hundreds gathered for a prayer service in Dar es Salaam yesterday, mourning those killed by security forces during recent unrest. Leading the service, the Archbishop of Dar es Salaam, who said Tanzania had lost its dignity. He called the killings a disgrace before God. The Archbishop added that the punishment for protesting cannot be death by gunfire. Listen in.
Our nation has been wounded, and it has lost its dignity because of what transpired during the week of the general election. It has not only lost its honor but also its people, citizens who were unlawfully killed. There are people who were killed while demonstrating, yet the punishment for protesting is not death by gunfire. There are also those who were killed in their own homes. They were pursued and murdered right inside their houses. That does not, in any way, reflect the true image of Tanzania.
The unrest in Tanzania began in the wake of the October 29th election, in which President Samia Suluhu Hassan won over 98% of the votes, according to the Election Commission. The 65-year-old ran only against candidates from minor parties. This after her main challengers from the two biggest opposition parties were disqualified. As Tanzanians took to the streets to protest against the election process, security forces reportedly opened fire, killing hundreds according to rights activists, though the death toll is feared to be in the thousands. The true scale of the security crackdown continues to be obscured by internet restrictions which were imposed during and after the election. President Hassan's government has not yet released an official figure on casualties and arrests that have followed her return to power. The opposition party Chadema has called these elections a sham, citing incidents of ballot stuffing and intimidation. Earlier today, at least 4 senior opposition leaders detained over election-related unrest were released on bail. Hundreds have been charged with conspiracy to commit treason and treason itself. It's important to note that in Tanzania, treason is punishable by death. African Union observers say the vote failed to meet democratic standards, citing ballot manipulation and a lack of transparency. As Tanzania grapples with the aftermath of a bloody election, the calls for justice grow louder, from churches and families of the dead to international leaders demanding accountability. Next, we head to Nigeria, where a terrorist turf war has left around 200 people dead. Fresh fighting between rival jihadists in the northeast of Nigeria is the latest in a series of deadly incidents this century. The fighting took place between Boko Haram and rival militants from Islamic State West Africa Province, or ISWAP. It broke out in the village of Dogon Chiku, on the shores of Lake Chad, which is now almost completely dry. It is in an area located at the junction of Nigeria, Niger, Chad and Cameroon. The riverine corridor serves as an operating zone for jihadists who make money from taxing local fishers, loggers and herders. This is the latest violent episode in the fight for territory and influence in the wider region. While the exact death toll has not been confirmed, an intelligence source in Nigeria has said the casualty total was more than 150. The source is also quoted as saying the fighting is good news for us, while a vigilante group member who works with the Nigerian military said around 200 ISWAP terrorists were killed. Sources have suggested that higher casualties were suffered by the ISWAP, with several boats used by the militant group seized by Boko Haram. Let's now take a look at the recent history of violence involving jihadist groups in Nigeria. In 2009, following the killing of former Boko Haram leader Mohammed Yusuf, jihadist conflict has killed more than 40,000 people while displacing around 2 million in the predominantly Muslim northeast of Nigeria. In 2016, ISWAP splintered from Boko Haram, that allied with IS. This split has led to intense fighting between the groups ever since. In May of 2021, ISWAP launched an offensive in Sambisa, which had been Boko Haram's long-term base. The group kept abducted schoolgirls amid fierce clashes. And between December 2022 and January 2023, Boko Haram launched raids at 2 ISWAP bases. More than 100 ISWAP fighters were killed, with caches of weapons seized. Now, these latest clashes risk heightening tensions as both factions fight to gain superiority in the region. And this news flashpoint comes in the wake of recent comments from President Donald Trump, where he threatened military action against Muslim extremists in the country who he says are killing Christians. While this latest jihadist turf war is not linked to Trump's claims, this is another example of extremist tension and violence in Nigeria at a point where the nation's government is under an international spotlight. Shifting focus now to South Africa. A daughter of former President Jacob Zuma is on trial for her alleged role in the deadly 2021 riots. Duduzile Zuma Sambudla faces charges of incitement of violence and terrorism. She denies all the charges. The 43-year-old arrived yesterday at a Durban court for the opening of her trial that has reignited memories of South Africa's most violent unrest in decades. Police sealed off the area outside the courthouse. The supporters gathered in defiance, rallying behind the Zuma family name once again. And inside the courtroom, former President Jacob Zuma himself took a front row seat in a show of support for his daughter. Duduzile Zuma, a senior member of her father's MK party, stood in the dock beside her lawyer. She pled not guilty to charges of inciting public violence and terrorism. The Zuma family also denied these charges, suggesting that by posting on social media during the 2021 unrest, Duduzile Zuma was simply exercising her freedom of speech. Her defense argues that the charges are politically motivated and that she's being punished for her family name. Listen in.
They are saying she incited the upheaval that happened. She incited that. This is the charge. And then they think that's not strong enough. Then they want to give it another label. They say there is terrorism and all of that. This is the charge that she's facing. A very serious crime, which she didn't commit. She was just sitting there and then just exercising freedom of speech on something that has already happened. And for some reason, she's now being made as the source of why it happened. And yet she commented after the fact.
These allegations trace back to July of 2021, when South Africa spiraled into chaos following Jacob Zuma's jailing for contempt of court. What began as protests over his arrest quickly exploded into riots in several parts of South Africa. Aerial footage from Durban at the time showed warehouses ablaze, smoke pouring into the skyline as mobs looted and torched supply depots. Truck yards burned, roads were blocked and entire business districts were gutted. Over 350 people were killed in the violence, and the financial damage topped 50 billion rand, or nearly $3 billion. For many South Africans, the week-long unrest exposed the country's vast inequality, unemployment, and anger towards the political elite. Back in court, prosecutors argued that Duduzile Zuma's social media posts during the peak of the unrest directly encouraged violence and looting. They alleged she weaponized her online following to inflame tensions after her father's arrest. But her legal team insists her social media posts were political commentary and not incitement. The courtroom scenes have revived political undercurrents from South Africa's last election, when Zuma's breakaway MK party cut deeply into votes of President Cyril Ramaphosa's African National Congress. The current trial is scheduled to run until November the 21st, with the world watching how the justice system handles one of its most politically charged cases since the end of apartheid. And for our final story, let's shift our focus to Zambia. Israeli President Isaac Herzog made his first ever official visit to Zambia on Monday, becoming the first Israeli president to visit the southern African country. He received a grand welcome from the Zambian government officials at the Kenneth Kwanda International Airport in Lusaka. Upon arrival, Herzog received a ceremonial military welcome and was greeted by Zambian President Hakainde Hichilema. This is a reciprocal visit coming 2.5 years after the Zambian president's trip to Israel. The trip highlights deepening bilateral relations, building on Israel's reopening of its Zambian embassy in August. The embassy opening had marked the first time in more than 50 years that the Israeli flag flew again in Lusaka. The two leaders are expected to engage in discussions designed to expand collaboration across key sectors, from agriculture and health to technology and trade, signalling a broader push to deepen strategic partnerships and potentially engaging in new joint initiatives in the months ahead. Listen in to what Ofra Fari, Israel's ambassador to Zambia, had to say about the visit.
It's a very exciting day. For the first time, Israeli president is landing in Zambia. It's the first presidential visit to Zambia. It's very important for us. It's a reciprocal visit to the visit of His Excellency President Hakainde Hichilema to Israel 2.5 years ago. And it just shows the strengthening of bilateral relation between the two countries.
And the message from both sides is clear. The relationship is entering a more active and strategic phase. Herzog later addressed the visit on social media. In a post on X, the Israeli leader thanked President Hichilema for the warm welcome and the Israeli people for their deep friendship. He added that Israel values its partnership with Zambia, one of Africa's long-standing democracies, and intends to keep strengthening it. He also said that while both countries look to new opportunities, they must also confront shared challenges and help ease humanitarian crises across the continent, calling it a moral responsibility for both nations. For Zambia, this partnership could open access to new technology and developmental support, particularly in agriculture, health and water management.
We're building the relations and strengthening them mainly in the fields of agriculture, of health, economy, water management, all the things that Zambia really are struggling with, and we have the know-how. We're very happy to share our knowledge, and we love this cooperation with Zambia.
The timing of this visit is crucial, as it happens in the backdrop of the recent conflict in Gaza, reflecting Israel's broader push to rebuild its presence in Africa and support development-driven partnerships. That's it on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Until then, thank you for watching.